The purpose of this video is to explain and then demo the installation of a connector, which is an external software component required by many of the scheduler integrations, like Automic or Control-M. The connector is a small component that usually sits on a third-party system and connects to the AAI server to deliver the events and definition data. For this video, we're going to use the integration into a Broadcom scheduler solution, Automic Automation, as an example. However, we need to stress one important point. AAI supports integrations into several automation products, Control-M, AutoSys, Tidal, and many more. The integration methods and their underlying technologies vary greatly from one scheduler to the next. As a result, what you'll learn in this lesson may not apply to you, unless of course your scheduler of choice is Automic Automation. We have catalog course offers dedicated to each scheduler, and we recommend you seek out the ones that apply to your environments. We include this lesson in the administration course, so you understand the architecture of AAI and the resulting configuration requirements. Automic Automation is specific in that AAI uses the Automic REST API, not the database, to source its information. When we set up the connection in the web UI, we have to specify both the REST API and the Automic Web Interface, or AWI URLs. Once we've established that the connector is working, we configure an Automic Automation connection in the AAI web UI. This system connects to the Automic REST API and acquires definition and event data. For our demo, we have three systems. The AAI server host is a Unix system and its host name is AAI00. The Automic Automation system is also Unix. It's on a host called Scheduler01. We have a third system called Connector, and we're going to install the connector component on the system. Once installed, we have to configure the connection to the AAI system in a file called application.yaml. We'll check the log to establish that the connector framework is talking to the AAI server. Then we'll head to the AAI web UI and set up our connection to the Automic Automation server. AAI acquires the data using the REST API. This is the procedure. Before deploying the Automic Connector framework, we have to make one change in client 0 of Automic Automation. We enable the UC_system settings execution trigger variable, which may be enabled by default. Next, make sure AAI is running. We install the connector as root. We download the latest version of the AAI Automic Connector from the Broadcom download sites. We unzip it. On Unix, it produces a tar.gz file which you gunzip and untar. Untarring produces an installation script which you execute with the install option. Other options exist to upgrade or uninstall. Installing creates a directory in /opt/automic-connector, which contains the packages files. The connector is installed. Next, we configure the connector so that it can communicate with the AAI server. For this, we execute the configuration script and enter the appropriate values. These values will be propagated to file application.yaml, which you find at the root of the connector directory. The script checks your values and establishes a connection with AAI. If the connection fails, you receive an error message. You will need to fix application.yaml manually. Next, we use the systemctl command to start the connector. Systemctl comes with a number of options: start, stop, restart, status, and enable. Then we check the log to make sure the connector is talking to AAI. If you make a mistake during the configuration, you can update application.yaml manually. We'll show the file. Finally, we add the scheduler in the AAI web UI version 2, so that the connector is able to acquire events and definition data from Automic Automation. Before deploying the Automic Connector framework, make sure you log into client 0 in Automic and check that the variable execution trigger is enabled in UC system settings. The command should be consistent with what we just described. Unzip the file, gunzip the tar.gz package, untar the package, install the framework. Execute the configuration script as the Automic Connector user. Configure by entering the appropriate values which propagate to application.yaml. Start the service, check the log for messages. Update application.yaml as needed. Restart the service if you have made changes to application.yaml. Check the status of the connector. Set the service to auto-start at boots. Finally, configure the scheduler connector in the web UI. First, we log in as root since the entire procedure should be executed with admin privileges on both Unix and Windows. Then we navigate to the package downloaded from the Broadcom download sites. We unzip, gunzip, and untar. We execute the install script. This will create the Automic-connector package directory under /opt. The install script is executed with the install option. If you need help with options, just execute the script on its own. We execute the configuration script. This initiates a dialog so that you can provide the values that are added to application.yaml. We have to provide the AAI server URI. Simply type in HTTP, the AAI server hostname, and the 8080 port since we're not deploying TLS. We provide a connector name that will be reflected in the web UI. You should use a name that includes the word Automic if you're planning on connecting multiple schedulers so that you can tell them apart. Enter the hostname of the connector where you're currently installing. You can ignore this since we're not setting up TLS. Then we provide the admin username and password so that the connector can log into AAI. As soon as you validate, the password is encrypted in application.yaml. The domain is always JAWS. Provide the path to the logs directory. By default, the directory is called logs and is placed in the connector package directory. Provide sizing and rotation values. You can always adjust these later on based on data volumes processed by the connector. The setup was successful. The connector is able to communicate with AAI. If you get an error message, you'll need to update application.yaml manually. We'll show how to do this in a minute. We use systemctl to start the connector service. This will start outputting to the log. The connector started successfully. Let's assume you're getting errors. You need to configure application.yaml manually. Let's show this now. In the application.yaml file, you see the values you entered during configuration. Notice the log file name. You have the option of changing this. Remember that any changes made to the YAML file must be followed by a restart. We use systemctl to check the status of the connector. The connector is started. Finally, we set the service to auto-start at boot so that you don't have to start the connector each time you reboot the system. We give the connection a name, which is your choice. We select the connector that we created when we defined it in the application.yaml file. Then we need to specify the Automic system name. For Automic automation users, this is the system name as defined in the automation engine's ucsrv.ini file. Then we add the URL to the Automic REST API and the client whose data we want to use in AAI. Remember, you need a dedicated connection per client. We also specify the user with privileges to the REST API in that client. If you're not sure what to use, it's a safe bet that the ID you use to log into AAI will work here. We also need the AAI URL. You're currently set up with a once-a-day acquisition of definition data. If you'd like to increase this, simply check the boxes that you need. If you check the REST API debug function, you will generate a log of the REST API outputs. The projected start time period determines how far in the future you want to go in collecting forecasted jobs. The default is set to 7 days, which is acceptable. The polling interval is set to 30 seconds by default, which is low enough to keep Automic and AAI in sync without impacting performance. AAI will wait 5 minutes by default before giving up on polling the API in the event of a no response, and 2 minutes to retry the acquisition of the definition data. As long as your elements are correct, the connection will be established after a few minutes. If you want to see the connection go active and Automic automation is quiet, run a dummy job. This will activate the connector. To establish with certainty that your connection is valid, check the log. Remember that each time you make a configuration change, you need to restart the connector with the systemctl command. Check the log after doing so. You'll see the number of jobs being imported in AAI.